Hi guys, welcome back. So we're off and running. A destruction of Australia by South Africa. The build up to the World Cup has begun, the Rugby Championship has begun, and what a dominant way to do it for South Africa, and what a terrible way to start, to be honest, for Australia. I mean, it was going to be a tough assignment for Australia, but they almost had nothing to hang their hats on right until the end, where Carter Gordon came on and showed some of his skill, creating and scoring a try at the end. So they had one thing to be thankful for, but apart from that, probably nothing else. Now, if you haven't looked at one of my match reports before, the way I do it is I do a bit of a summary. I talk about the flow of the game because I love the story of the game. Then I pick out bits and pieces from the game as we go. If that's your sort of jam, then do subscribe, do like. So I'm going to be doing loads of this building up to the World Cup and the World Cup itself. So for South Africa, they'll be pleased with their scrum, their line out as normal, their maul as normal, but Klein was really good in the line out, the debutant there. In the scrum, it probably didn't help Australia that Kitsoff was drafted in last minute, but they pretty much destroyed them all the way through, although Australia, to be fair, were down to 14 men a couple of times. Their own fault, of course, but that has to be noted. Now, early on, we could see that Australia had been working on lots of variations. Eddie Jones clearly had been trying to get lots of variations into their line out, especially to try and test the South African defence. But they weren't really having any of it early on. There was a long throw, then there was a decoy maul and a pop, but South Africa were just watching it. And all the way through the game, the big guys of Australia that we thought might make a difference, Valetini, Skelton, were completely nullified. A, in the tackle from South Africa, and B, because Australia got very little of the ball. Early shot from distance for Liebok, just missed, but straight away we could see South Africa weren't going to be having any of those little decoy plays from Australia, and Australia did show their hand fairly early with quite a lot of plays, and it went a bit downhill from there, although they did score the first try, which is ironic in a way because the one line-out variation that didn't work for Australia, as in technical execution, was the one that did work in scoring the try. Ball bounces a bit weird. They spread it wide very nicely, right, especially with a really good pass. And Kurumbeti shows his pace to fly in out wide 5-0. So, yes, Australia start with the score, but it actually wasn't off a particularly clean play. And then the destruction starts to happen. On 11 minutes, the first South African scrum marches Australia backwards. The South African forwards go to work with some massive carries round the corner, making serious dents, and that was the theme all game. Australia just couldn't stop South Africa on the gain line at all. Forces an offside, they get a penalty, 5-3. And then there's a big overlap on the right for South Africa, and Stadden has his blinkers on, which is a bit of a shock really, but luckily on the next phase of play, LaRue has great vision as always, buzzes a lovely pass off his left hand to free Moody. It's a bit messy, but they do manage to work it back to the left, and Arend strolls in for his first try, 5-10, and that is, the floodgates opened for South Africa. So yeah, Australia scored early on, but South Africa were definitely the better team early on as well. On 70 minutes, we see Liebok's pace. There are holes in Australia's spacing. He goes about 60 metres, but loses it. And South Africa, to be fair to them, did leave a lot of points out there, but they scored a lot of points as well. So I guess you could see that as a positive. Yeah, Liebok definitely dangerous. And if you start him though, I think it does work with having LaRue as a tactical kicker. He did a lot of the heavy lifting on the tactical kicks. Just thinking that maybe LaRue's a slightly better tactical kicker, although Liebok played well, kicked his goals well. It takes 20 minutes for Australia to have their first foray into the South African half with some decent ball, but it's Skelton, unfortunately, the big man that we hoped so much for, who spilt it. That was a bad error. And they had a couple of times when they nearly got away, Australia, but forward passes and errors really cost them. They just couldn't get anything going. Then we do see that good jackal from Hooper early on with Moody getting isolated, but Hodge has a crack from distance, drags it wide. Now another tactic that Australia were trying early on was the high bomb from Hodge, but no joy. South Africa generally dealt with it okay, a couple of spilled balls, and I think you have to be fair to Australia, they didn't get the bounce of the ball as well as being dominated, but sometimes it just doesn't go for you anywhere. Then on 28 minutes, a nasty missed tackle from Icky Tau. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but that was a bad error from him. Both of the centres for Australia not being effective at all. A centre who was very effective was Esterhuizen, his best game in green by miles. Causes some destruction, makes a big break. Then a lovely line-out maul, and the Australians are completely focused on the danger of the maul. And then South Africa have an option plan blind, and they call it. Mbonambi putting a nice ball out to Arends, who wraps round and hits the ball at top pace, which he had to do because Vunivalu wasn't far away, but just roasts round the corner. Brilliant play, best play so far of the match. And South Africa seriously on top now. So that is 17-5. And then Eddie Jones, in classic style, if he doesn't like it, he acts. Fair play to him. Maybe he didn't make a difference, but he hooked Tom Hooper off very early. I mean, if you get hooked off before half-time, you know the coach isn't happy, so maybe his days at blindside are a bit numbered, or maybe, you know, that is his chance to make the World Cup squad gone. I don't know, but that was tough to take because he was getting the blame for maybe a team failing. But anyway, he gets hooked off early. Samu on. South Africa, yeah, they're purring now in that line out. Really easy ball, massive carries. Vermeulen as well looked great. I didn't think he'd look that great, but he looked really, really good. Rolling back the years, him and Esterhuizen especially, just making serious holes. And the speed, they're getting the ball to the speed of Moody and Arends. Reinach causing some good havoc as well. And when they brought on Grant Williams, he actually stepped up the pace from scrum half. He was seriously impressive. And Australia, they're just hanging on to half time. On 40 plus minutes, Australia do get the chance to get some more points from Hodge, but not enough powder in his howitzer boot, and it falls just short. So anyway, 17-5, Australia need to regroup because they're really struggling. Get Cooper in the backline in the game. The good thing for them is they're not out of sight on the scoreboard, but goodness me, they need to change things quick. But after half-time, it just continues. Esterhuizen making the gain line, Klein looking super comfortable in the line-out. The maul nearly creates a try, but they just fumble it. And I think the only downside in this period is South Africa should have scored a few more points. But anyway, they look very comfortable in their structure. It's not lightning quick, but it's very safe. The kick chase is really good, won them a lot of penalties, but Mbonambi again throws away a chance with a poor throw, so just leaving a few points out there. But finally, on 50 minutes, the dam breaks. It was probably going to. There's only one team in it. Vermeulen, Van Staden, Pieter-Steph du Toit, just making easy yards. I mean, they're not easy, but they're just wading through the Australian defence, making it look easy. Am has time to give a good 2-on-1. Arends somehow steps and spins away from 3 Australian defenders covering. I think it's Hooper, Korombetti and Vunivalu. That's pretty embarrassing for Australia. His hat-trick. 2 of Australia's big men get replaced. Hodge and Skelton not had an impact at all. Karevi and Arnold come on, 2 new big men, but the first act that Karevi does is to give away a penalty, and it's really men versus boys in the maul. They go over the line, but it's a clear collapse from Parecki because it is held up over the line, so it's a yellow card and a penalty try, one of 2 penalty tries, 29-5. And it's been a terrible day for the Wallabies. I put here, can it get any worse? Are there any positives? And I'm not sure there are really. Vunivalu has a real shocker of a game, a clumsy penalty, then caught dithering in the pass by Pieter-Steph du Toit. It looks like Liebok has strolled in, but Pieter-Steph du Toit does just knock on. I think we may have seen the end of Vunivalu for a while. We may well see now Akwana come in for his spot. Wright did a few decent things, to be fair to him, in the back 3. Anyway, it's been 60 minutes, and I write here I can't remember a good go-forward multi-phase attack from Australia, and that's their traditional strength. Under Rennie, they got some really good fast phase attacks, some flair in the backs, and we've seen none of it. Sure, they've been dominators as well, which doesn't help, but in the few chances they've had, they haven't got it going at all. 20 minutes to go, and South Africa are absolutely crushing the Australian scrum by now. Australia, to be fair, are down a man there as well at this point. South Africa a little bit loose and should score again. But I make a note here, it's great to see Snyman back, and he looks fully fit and enjoying it. Goodness me, the South Africans enjoyed their game. The fans had an absolute party. If you were there, let me know what it felt like. But the atmosphere just seemed great from TV. Now, a case in point on the physical dominance South Africa had. Valetini goes on a big run, tries to hand off Dwayne Vermeulen. He goes nowhere, and Valetini only succeeds in pushing himself over. And I think that highlights the fact that South Africa absolutely smashed Australia physically. On 65 minutes, we get another really good try. That Klein-Esterhuizen launch play combo, so effective. Grant Williams really causing problems with his extra pace, sniping from the ruck. Pieter-Steph du Toit is over, but he's well held up. but it's just such a bad day for Australia that Cooper knocks the ball straight into touch, gives South Africa that 5-metre scrum, and then Grant Williams again stressing the Australian defence, and Vunivalu continues his horror show, deliberate knock-on, gets a yellow card, another penalty try. Deserved points for South Africa really, 36-5. Now in the last 10 minutes the game opens up as South Africa enjoy themselves, Australia going for broke, and we get another really good try for South Africa. We get a destruction in the penalty from South Africa, lets them kick to the line out. Great take from Snyman in the line out. Some bash from South Africa, too good. The defence opens up, Peter Steph du Toit just dots down unopposed. Yes, Australia down to 14 men again, but that is their fault, and it just looks like men against boys, particularly in that carry. The tries there, Liebok, great conversion, so 43-5. Then with the clock in the red, I think we get the only thing Australia can get genuinely excited for. Carter Gordon comes on, a lovely grubber in behind, creates the break, and he supports to step and score a really good try from deep. So that was a good try. They end on a positive. The other 80 minutes of the game was a complete negative, 43-12. Great start for South Africa. Watch out, world. Here they come, trying to go back-to-back in the World Cup. Australia, the only good news for them is it can only get better. Pop all the comments of those games below. Do subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you next time.